Hey guys, what's up? This is Terpitu. Hope you guys are doing okay, and welcome to the video. In this video, I'll be teaching you how to do loops and iterations in Roblox scripting. If you haven't watched the previous episode, as usual, I highly suggest that you go watch it. I've left a link down below in the description. And if you have coded before, I'll basically be covering how to do while loops, for loops, and repeat until loops in Roblox scripting. If you haven't coded before, or if you haven't heard of those terms before, don't worry, you'll be able to learn all of those terms in this episode. So yeah, without further ado, let's get right into it. So before we script, we have to first answer the key question, which would be why do we need to know what loops and iterations are, and why do we need to know how to do them? So yeah, that's probably what you're thinking right now. A simple answer would be that it's really important. You basically, loops and iterations is used effectively in a lot of scripts, in most of your scripts, I'd say. Um, and what it does is it pretty much makes your code more efficiently, and it prevents a lot of repeating code as well. There's a lot of benefits to learning it, but yeah, so let's dive into this question a bit more deeper. So yeah, so obviously a loop is pretty much something that's gonna run an amount of code that it's been given. So like let's say for example I wanted to do a loop that would print out a message to the output like 100 times for example. So instead of me having to write down print and then the message and then copying and pasting that line of code 100 times, what I can simply do is I can make a for loop that that pretty much just does that for me instead. That's one use case scenario of using it. So as you can see there, it makes it really efficient, and it means if we want to add any like additional changes to it, we don't have to change every individual 100 like lines, but instead we can just change that one line, and the for loop will just repeat that same line. So it makes changing something that is being in a loop really easy as well. And there's other use case scenarios as well. So that's just one. That's making your code more efficient and prevents repeating code as well because it's done in a loop. Two, an actual game use case scenario would be like it's like let's say you have a mini game for example, and you want to do a countdown. So you want to do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What you can do, instead of having to type down 5 and then 4 and then 3 and then what you can simply do is you once again make a for loop that counts from 5 all the way down to 1, and that literally completes your task in way less lines than having to write down each number individually. Another example would be, let's say you have let's say you're in a RPG game and players just killed a boss, and you want to give every player, a set amount of currency. What you can simply do is you can instead of having to write down a line or multiple lines of players to add the currency, which I'm pretty sure you wouldn't be able to anyways, because the players aren't set with their names and stuff like that. What you can simply do is you can just make a for loop. Once again, you can see the pattern, right? It's a for loop is used quite a lot, but you can use a for loop over the players and then just simply give them like 100 extra currency, and you can literally do that with a line or two. It's really simple. And yeah, that's a few use case scenarios in a game. But I can tell you now, like 90% of scripts that you'll be scripting will use some sort of loop, I'd say, or iteration. But yeah, that's your answer to why we need to use loops and iterations in our code. So just a summary is to make our code more efficient, removes the repeating lines of code, and three, that some game logic will require us to do loops, or it can help us process data, such as looping through the players and giving them currency. Yeah, so let's get straight into scripting now that we know why we need to learn the skill. So I'm gonna go ahead and create myself a script, remove this, and this first script that I'll teach you is my first loop that I'll teach you would be a while loop. So a while loop is pretty simple. So a while loop will always repeat the block of code that's given, as long as the condition that it's been given is met. So I'm just gonna go ahead and write it down for you. So this would be the syntax. So you write down the keyword while, and then you'd put in your condition now. So let's say I want to do while 1 + 1 = 2, do, and then that's pretty much it. As soon as you press enter on do, it'll put an end, and now whatever you type in between the while and the end is gonna be repeated as long as this condition is met. It's pretty straightforward. So let's say I just want to do print calculation is correct. So pardon me, but yeah, so if I were to press play, this would pretty much repeat itself an infinite amount of times because this condition will always be met. So you probably don't see the issue right now. However, there is a small problem with this. If I were to press play, I would crash. Shocker, I know. But the reason why Roblox Studio would crash is because while this while loop is repeating itself, it's not actually being yielded or having a wait in there somewhere. And this basically just means Roblox Studio will repeat this infinitely amount of times, like as quick as possible, and then it just basically crashes Studio. That's I don't really know the technicals of why it happens. But all I know is that if you want to do a while loop that has a condition that will always be met, such as 1 + 1 = 2, because 1 + 1 will always equals 2. It can't ever change, right? You would want to add something like this. So you'd add task.wait, and then you'd put a bracket, and then I'm gonna do .1. And now if I were to press play, this would be able to write it down without crashing Roblox Studio. As you can see here, it's writing it down, and you can see here it's growing. It's always growing, and it'll always grow, until the game stops. So yeah, that's a while loop. So you'll probably think of a use case scenario for this. It's pretty straightforward. So let's say I've got a mini game, and I wanna do a while there's a set amount of players, you can start the game. So let's say if we wanted to do that, we can simply make a while loop that does while game.players dot I'll do dot, is there a number of players? Shouldn't use this, but it can do get children, or it can also do get players as well. However, I personally just do get children. I'll just find it better. I'm just used to that, But yeah, we can just literally do, so we get children, we put in a hashtag, and then we put in a condition. So while the amount of players is above 2, or I'll do 1, do, and then start game sequence. Yeah. So this is one example of a code. So this will do a while loop of, it'll check the amount of players that are currently in the game. So by doing that, we simply do this. So we do game.players, and then we do a colon, and I use this function called getChildren. So getChildren basically just means, it's, as the name insists, that it'll get the children or the people that are underneath this object here. Usually when a player joins, they'll be underneath this service, and that will never change. So that's why you can simply do get children, and then afterwards we will get a table or a list of players. However, we need to get the amount of objects in that list. So what we simply do is we just add this hashtag in front of it, and yeah, so adding a hashtag just basically gets the amount of objects in the list. You might not know too much about this now, but I will cover this in the next episode, where I'll cover lists and tables in more detail. But yeah, so all you need to know is that it'll get the amount of players, and then it'll do a simple check of if they're above more than 1 player in the game, then start the minigame sequence. So yeah, that's one use case scenario of a while loop. And yeah, so I want to teach you the next loop that you can do in Roblox scripting that is used a lot, and I would say yeah, so this is the for loop. So I'm gonna remove this, and Actually, I'll leave this so I can use this as an example later on. I'll name this while loop scripts. Let me fix that while loop script. I'll create another script and I'll remove that, and I'll teach you what for loops are now. So a for loop is a bit different to while loops. So a for loop will have a range pretty much. So it'll only repeat itself a set amount of times before it ends. So this is a bit better, just like let's say for example you wanted to do a countdown. So doing a while loop wouldn't be the best option when we got for loops, because for loops will have a set amount of times and then it'll end afterwards. So we could just do like a for loop of beginning at 5 and then it'll count down from that. But with a while loop, it's a bit more. You can still do it with a while loop, but it's a bit more complicated to say. It's not too complicated once you know, but it's just easier to do it with a for loop. So yeah, so I'll just show you the syntax for loop. It's pretty easy. You just write down keyword for, and then you do for, and then you write down a variable name. So here I'm going to do for I, and then you set it to the beginning of your range. So I'm going to do 1. So I want the for loop to start at number 1. For I equals 1, and then you do comma, and then you do the end of the range. So I'm going to do 10. And then after you do similar to what we do with while, and then we just press enter. And then as you can see here, we've got our for loop created, and anything that's written between for and end will be repeated. So yeah, it's pretty easy. So you can see that we get this variable as well. So this is I, but we don't have to leave it as I. We can change this to v, or we can change it to number, or iterations. We can literally change it to anything. Just think of it as a normal variable that I've taught you before in the previous episodes. So yeah, so with this for I loop that begins from 1 and ends at 10, we can simply make it, let's say I wanted to just write down the numbers from 1 to 10. I can just do that by doing print, and I'd write down the variable name, and then I'd close the brackets, and that's it. As you can see here, I don't need to do a wait function like I did in the while loop, but that's only because this function will end eventually. However, with the while loop, that will end indefinitely if the condition will always be met, like I showed you before, where 1 plus 1 equals 2, for example. So that's the reason why we're not using a wait here, so that it doesn't crash, because this won't ever crash. So yeah, so a quick explanation of what's going on here is I'm declaring a for loop here with a variable that will be set to 1, and it'll start at 1, and then it'll do this line of code or block of code. It'll go down, and then it sees that the variable I is not 10 yet, so it'll go up, and now I will be set to 2, and then it'll print down 2, it'll go down, see that I is not 10 yet, it'll go up, and then it'll be set to 3, and it'll print out 3, all the way till it reaches I equals 10. It'll print out 10, it'll go to the end, and it'll see that, oh, I'm now equal to 10. That's what I will be. And then that will be the end of the script. So let's see this in action. So I can just simply press play. And as you can see here, it just adds up, well, not adds, but it writes down the numbers from 1 to 10. As simple as that. So you're probably wondering, oh, how do you know that it's going to go up by 1, but not by 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever? It's simple. The default number that will go up by is 1. However, let's say we do want to customize this. Let's say we want to print out odd numbers instead. What we can simply do is we can introduce a third number by simply adding a comma, and then this number that you provide here will be the, what do you call it? Will be the amount of like numbers that will be added to I after every iteration. So we're gonna do 2. And this basically just means, similar to like what I explained before, however, instead of 1 being added to 1 at the beginning, I will be 1 plus 2. So I will then be 3, and then it'll print down 3, and it'll go down, and it'll be 3 plus 2, because this is what we provided here. And then I will be 5, and it'll print down 5, and then it'll basically do that until it reaches 10. However, it won't be able to reach 10 because obviously 10 is an even number. However, you don't have to worry, it won't crash or there won't be any errors as well. It will just end prematurely, pretty much. But yeah, so if we were to press play, you can see here that it adds up. It'll show the numbers in a odd format pretty much, not an even, like yeah. So 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So all odd numbers. Yeah. Let's say the last use case scenario that I do want to show you for this for loop would be, as I mentioned before, the countdown. So as you can see here, the numbers are going up, but let's say I wanted to do the numbers going down. So what we can do here is simple. We just do for I. We can make it begin at 5. We can end it at 1, and what we can do here is we can do -1. So this just simply means that at the end of the iteration, it'll do -1 on I instead of plussing 1. So yeah, it's as simple as that. So you just press play, and as you can see here, you kind of get the gist. 5 will get take away 1, and then 4 will get take away 1, all the way down to 1. So this would be how you do a countdown system. If you do want it to do actual seconds, for example, I'll just show you. We can just simply add in that task.wait brackets. We put in the amount of seconds, so I'm going to do 1. And then that should be a proper countdown now. So as you can see here, it goes from 5, 4, 3, 2, and then 1. And then yeah, so this is an example of a countdown. However, you can use this for many other scenarios as well. Pretty much whatever the game requires, to be fair. But yeah, let's say you wanted to spawn in like a set amount of coins in the game world. Like let's say you're making a simulator, right? You could simply do a for loop that spawns in 100 coins that people can collect in the world. We can do, that's like an example of what we can do here. Or let's say you want to spawn NPCs instead, we can do a for loop. But yeah, that's pretty much for loops explained. Alright, the last loop that I do want to get into is repeat loop. It's simply a repeat until loop, and it's similar to a while loop. However, they have key differences, I mean, between them two. So a while loop will check the condition first, and then if the condition is not met, it will not run the code block that it's underneath. However, in a repeat until loop, the first iteration of that loop will always be run, so it'll always run that code block at first, and then it'll check if the condition is met, and then it will end itself. So yeah. So I'll show you the format of how you would write this down in Roblox. So we would simply do repeats. That's the keyword. We just press enter, and then we get until, and then we put in the condition. So let's say I want to do 1 + 1 = 2. You don't have to do these brackets, by the way. You can just leave it like that. And then I'm going to do print repeating. So we'll get that in the output. If I were to press play, you would think that the Roblox Studio would crash like in the while loop, but it wouldn't, because this condition is already met straight away. However, if I were to do 1 + 1 = 3, where this condition will never be met, I hope you recognize what's going to happen. This is going to cause a Roblox Studio crash, and that's because this will be always repeating, and there is no wait or yielding functions in the code block. So this is a simple fix. We just do task.wait brackets 1, and we just make it wait 1 second pretty much, and then it basically won't crash the Roblox Studio. But yeah, that is how you would use a repeat until loop. Yeah, so it's a pretty straightforward function. To be fair, I don't really use this loop too much. I prefer using for loops and while loops a lot more. However, it still does have its use case scenarios. Can't think of it at the top of my head, but yeah, so that's how you do a repeat until loop. That's pretty much loops and while loops. I mean, that's loops and iterations explained pretty much. Yeah, so as I said, a while loop is let me just get up the script right now. A while loop is simply a loop that continues forever as long as this condition is met. For loop is a loop that has a range, so I'm going to do for I = 1 to 10, 2, and this will continue. Wait, print from 1 to 10, and then a repeat until loop is until this condition is met. So these are the 3 core loops. I don't think there's any other loops anyways in Roblox scripting, but these are the 3 loops that you should know. And from here on out, it's just pretty much you having to try it out, play around with it in Roblox Studio, and see what you can, you know, cook with these loops. I mean, before we end the video, I do want to show what I was talking about before. So if you remember before, I was talking about how we can do this. We could do this for loop, so make it print from 1 to 10 in a while loop. However, it's a bit more complicated. I do want to show that, so I'll do this quickly. So what we can do here is, let's say we wanted to keep a variable similar to what for loop does here. For loop here has a variable, right? So I'm going to create a variable doing local I equals 1 because I want the count to begin from 1. And then I can do while, and then I is below 10 do. Actually, I'll do below or equals to 10 do. And then what you would do here is I would want to do print I. So print out the value of the variable I. Then afterwards we'll do I equals I plus 1. And if we were to press play, what this would do is it'll go and check if this condition, okay, first it'll set the variable I to 1, and then it'll go inside this while loop and check the condition, is the variable I below or equal to 10. Obviously 1 is below 10, so it'll print out 1, and then over here it'll make I be set to I but plus 1. So this is kind of similar to what we did with the for loop. However, we don't have to do any of this. For loop does it automatically. But yeah, let's just press play and just show you that it works, right? And as you can see here in the output, it writes down 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 10 pretty much. So this is what I was explaining before, how that we can do the exact same thing on for loops, but do it in a while loop instead. I don't really see how we can, why you'd want to do this over doing just a for loop. I feel like a for loop is more safer and is prone to less errors of, you know, human mistakes and logic. So I would personally stick to for loops. However, if any of you viewers know more than me, feel free to just say in the comments why you'd rather do this while loop over a for loop. But yeah, so this is the end of the video, I'd say. This is just showing you the syntax and use case scenarios of how we can use the for loops, while loops, and repeat until loops. If you learn anything new, or if you want to, you know, learn something new, or if you have a question, be sure to write it down in the comments below. Feel free to write down what you've, you know, been able to do learning these loops in Roblox Studio. I'd say 100% test it out in Roblox Studio right now if you haven't. Yeah, so in my next episode, I do want to go over tables and lists, because I did show you in an example before. But obviously in the next video, I'll be going into it a lot more detail on what tables and lists are. But yeah, so if you do enjoy the video, be sure to leave a like and be sure to subscribe as well. That leaves, you know, that makes me feel like the video is doing good. So yeah, so be sure to leave some love just like that, leave some likes, leave a subscribe, tell your friends about it, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video. See you guys.